All right, we got this, oh frig, I don't even know what year this thing is. 2015 BMW 535D. It's a diesel. We got a wheel bearing that's out in the back of this thing, so we're gonna be tearing into it. We'll get that bearing changed. This is what it looks like. It's a press-in style slash bolt-in style. And I didn't really know these existed until just recently with a Buick. The man behind the camera there was telling me about a press-in, bolt-in style. And I was like, oh, I don't think I've ever done one of those. So first thing you gotta do is get the wheel off. 17 millimeter wheel bolts is what's gonna be holding your wheel on. We get that off. We're gonna be taking off our brakes and also this set screw. By the way, this set screw holds the center of it is 6 millimeter hex key style, 6-sided. And then I've got that on a hammer driver. If you don't know what that is, check it out. Also 13 millimeter bolts that hold your caliper on to the anchor here and here. And then also 13 millimeter bolts that hold the anchor to the steering knuckle. So I'm gonna go ahead and we'll start taking some of these fasteners off, get the brakes off of it. Take that off, just stuff it back there. Nice, brake pads are completely seized in place. Oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Those are inverted Torx. That 13 mil fits on there pretty good though. All right, they are E16 Torx, or sorry, inverted Torx. So I'm just gonna break these things loose. And then we're gonna just use our air tools to take them out the rest of the way. They must put Loctite on those because they are tight.
It's a whiner.
Ridiculous. Lots of corrosion in the knuckle, so it doesn't want to come out. Gross.
Just stop that.
Sorry. Hang on. Got our disc. Now, looks like this cap comes off here. There's probably an axle nut behind there because we have a all-wheel drive vehicle. And then what I'm gonna do, we gotta get our rear bolts out. You can see the ends of the bolts here. The fasteners are on the other side. The bolts go in from the back. And our dust plate's on here as well. We probably don't need to remove the dust plate in most circumstances. But in this case, I'm probably going to because it's so rusty and crappy around there that the bearing probably will not release out of the knuckle. It's probably frozen together, seeing as it's a steel bearing up against this aluminum housing. But I'll try to take it off first before I remove the backing plate. All right, so it's a little plastic center cap. Just be careful of that. I'm glad I didn't friggin' hammer on the thing. There we go. Now we got our axle nut in there. You can see that on the inside of this thing, it's a staked nut,
Double staked.
double staked. So these get hammered in so that the nut can't back off. So we need to unstake those before we put a socket on there and go to town on it. Otherwise, we're in for some trouble. So let's get that thing unstaked. Just gonna have to do. All right, we got a 36 millimeter 12-point impact socket. Ooh, sparks. Boom, off. Now, oh, that's probably nice and frozen in there. We're gonna go ahead and take these bolts out the back that you can't see. They're inverted Torx, and they're probably the same size as the brake caliper anchor bolts. Remember that, inverted Torx E16. I'm gonna slip one in there, see if that's the right one. Son of a gun. How am I gonna do that? I just didn't want to muck the threads in. Might go back further, I don't know. Definitely should go back further. That sucks. It's super seized in there. I kind of don't want to use this, but... Oh, it's going. Okay, that's loose now, so I'm just going to, I think what I'm going to do is go around and break them all loose. And then I'm going to try to go in from like back up in here where the control arm is with like an impact gun and try to like buzz them out that way. I just need to break them loose first. Yeah, that one needs to go deeper. That's the only one I can't get out. Hopefully your axle isn't seized in the splines of the bearing or the spindle like mine is. The way they design it, the axle is pretty big, right? So when it slides in there, part of the axle sits in front of the bolts. So you have to push the axle back far enough that you can like slip your socket in there. There's a bunch of manufacturers that do that, and makes a real pain. These things, these bolts are so tight. I'm gonna be hours freaking getting these bolts out, so the threads are in the bearing itself. I'm just gonna put some heat to them. Pray to God they come out nicer. All right, bolt number 3 coming out. Now I had to push that axle back all the way, or as far as it'll go, which is pretty much where you see it now. And it would not budge without putting heat in it, so I had to put the torch on there and get some heat into it to get it to move. And that gives me access to this side. These bolts were somewhat easy to get out. Like I could get the socket on them without pushing the axle too far in. But the ones on the side I'm doing on now, no way. Okay, we got all our bolts out now. We're gonna just give this a little schmack. Hopefully it comes free. That was sweet. Loving it. Now, I had to use heat, like I was saying, so this thing's still kind of hot, but this should come out, but it's completely stuck on there, so Let me see if I can coax it out the rest of the way with this thing. Perfect. It's a little toasty. Now we got to get this spindle, this portion, pressed out of the bearing itself. So it's going to be a little bit interesting. I got a split plate over at the press, so I'm going to cool this down, soak it in some water. We'll head over there and I'll show you how we can set this thing up and get it out. Whoops, shit. Gets you every time. Gotta back it out, change the space here again. If we're too thick, it's not gonna fit in the hole. I just have a split plate, that's this thing here. And it's just on there, holding up against the actual bearing outer housing. So, stack a couple things up here, take up our clearance. Make sure that doesn't fall. And then you can see there we've got our ball bearing cage full of bearings, a seal, and then our inner race. So we have to get this inner race off, which is fine, no problem. There's a couple ways we can do this. What I'm going to do is use a cut-off disc and cut a slot in it, and then use a hammer and a chisel, or an air hammer is what I'm going to use. I'm going to fracture that race, and it should fall right off. You could use a torch as well. There's videos out there of guys that have the thing that spins, and they just hold a torch to it while it's spinning, and then it expands and drops off. All right, just gonna cut this slot. There you go, we've seen it. You've seen it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Now, it looks like I went through a little bit. That's fine, no big deal. You just want to, if you're doing it like this, you just got to watch not to go through too badly. So that's how you do that. Now I'm just going to clean all this rust up. We'll probably sandblast the whole back of this, clean the threads, yada, yada, yada. I'll clean the surface on the other side as well. So when we go put the disc back on, everything's nice. And then we'll head over to the press and press that thing on. When you press that on, you need to press on the inner race, which is this ring right here. This is a magnet, so be careful. Do not set anything up that's going to press on the magnet. Do not set anything up that's going to press on the outer race only. You'll destroy the bearing if you do that. It's bottomed out. We're in there. We're good to go. Obviously, looking at it the way we took it off, the magnet needs to be facing towards the inside, towards the car. So that's it, we're pressed on. I'm gonna go clean up the car side of things now. You can see I've got I sandblasted everything, resurfaced this flange, painted everything. So it's gonna be nice and clean for install. And I'm gonna do the same thing to that knuckle. I'm gonna clean all the corrosion up, clean the bolts up, and it should go together real nice this time. Okay, when you're cleaning this stuff up, if yours is real crusty like this one, just watch, that's the sensor. That's what reads the magnet on the back of the bearing. Don't break it. It's made out of plastic, so pay attention to what you're doing. I'm gonna get all that crap out of there. You can see this backing plate's barely held on, it's pretty rotten. So I think what I'm gonna do is just take these off and stick washers behind them. And you know, it's just gonna hopefully make this last a little longer. I don't have a backing plate available, and it'll be probably days before we can get one in the location I live. But I don't want this to like crumble off. I know it won't fall off probably, but if it falls off in a week, you know, that's just gonna be a comeback. The guy's gonna be pissed. Then you gotta deal with it, with all the bearing and brakes and all stuff on there. So I'm just getting all this cleaned off. There's a bit of a spot here where the bearing is recessed into the knuckle for centering purposes. So I need to get all this corrosion off so that everything seats properly, is centered properly, and functions properly. Hopefully that fits. Okay, I'm gonna leave a link in the description for a new backing plate. If yours is really crappy looking, go down there and buy one. I don't recommend doing this just in case you don't realize that the edge of the washer is stuck underneath of the bearing or something like that. You know, the bearing might not seat properly, etc., etc. So proceed with caution if you're thinking of doing this. I don't recommend it unless you really know what you're doing. Okay, we got everything cleaned up. I did put a little bit of lube on those splines, not the threads, but the splines. And we'll get this lined up and pushed in here. I cleaned everything up in hopes that it would go back together nicer. So if I can get that somewhat started, that'd be fantastic. Looks like it's gonna be a pain going into. Trying to think of how I can do this. I might have to just hold the axle and hit it with a soft dead blow or something just to get it to go in. All right, I'm trying to take the sensor out now because I'm beating on this thing and I fear that the axle is gonna break the end of the sensor off. So I have to take it out so that I can try to get this bearing to slide onto the splines. All right, we're trying something a little different here. We're just gonna use the socket for the axle nut, and I got it on an attachment for an air hammer. We've been beating on this thing trying to get it to go in. The axle obviously can slide in and out, right? So it's so tight on the splines for some reason. And I made sure, like I got a little bit of overspray of paint on just the outer portion of the splines up here, but I made sure I taped off the back to not get any on there. So it was clean right up to about that much of the splines on here. So it's not the paint. So we're just gonna try this, see if we can maybe like rattle it in with the air hammer, I don't know. All right, it's going now. We're getting it. I just needed enough I can get the nut in there and start the nut, and we'll just pull it in the rest of the way. Perfect. That's good enough for me. Make sure that this fits in there without interfering on anything. I'm just gonna get the bolts all started on that and get this thing bolted down. So the bolts They all had a red Loctite on them, and they were corroded. There was a bunch of aluminum corrosion all stuck in the threads, so I cleaned them all off. It's up to you whether you want to put red Loctite back on them or not. You do have to remember that, here's the shitty thing, I guess. Remember, we have to have the axle kind of outwards in order to get the bolts in there, so it's a bit of back and forth, right? I'm gonna see if I can get these started. That's good. That one's good. Bottom one's good. Okay, they're all in. We got every bolt in there. This top one's gonna be the most difficult, I would say. Was for me anyways. For some reason, it's difficult to get the socket in beside where the axle is and how it's all surrounded by this aluminum knuckle. Plus, it's in an area where you're just blind. You can't see where the bolt is unless you're in back there with a light and you're trying to do it maybe, but it's definitely higher difficulty level, that's for sure. Lots of patience is required. So, got that nut started now on there. I'm gonna buzz that down and I'll give you torque specs here in a second. What I'm gonna do next is go get a torque spec for this, get you torque specs for those, and we'll get some things snugged down. I did take this out. I was afraid when we were trying to get the spindle portion splined to the axle, I was afraid of breaking the sensor, so I took it out. And luckily it came right out, surprisingly. So just gonna stick that back in now that we've got everything somewhat installed. All right, so here's the thing with BMWs. In the service manual information, which is provided by ProDemand here, it's a little bit confusing on what the torque spec's supposed to be. Now, I understand these wheel bearing to carry your, that's obviously the 4 bolts that hold the bearing on, 100 Newton meters, which leaves us with these other torque measurements. Output shaft on drive flange hump, that's our axle nut. Now, we could have a couple options here, M27, M16, or M27. I believe, see it says replace collar, bolt, and spring, and this says replace collar nut. So we do have a nut, so I'm gonna say it's either this is M27 or this M27 down here.
M16 would be for a female bolt.
Right. Now, that sort of leaves us with 2 options, but is it 100 Newton meters plus 45-degree rotation, or is it just 420 Newton meters? I don't know. Take your pick. You can call the dealer with your VIN and ask them, and hopefully you get somebody nice and they give you an answer. So I really don't know what to tell you.
Are these VIN codes here? Like, I don't know. Type.
Yeah. Because this says F06 as well up here.
But
oh,
F03.
Sorry. Yeah, F03.
Let's go check the VIN.
Yeah.
So all these are 100?
Yeah, all of these ones technically are 73.8 foot-pounds or 100 Newton meters. Okay, we got those staked. Now we're Finally, after 3 hours, we're ready to go back together here. Mating surfaces, back of the disc, front of the disc, nice and clean. We'll align our set screw hole and get our set screw put in place. Now this thing only has to be just hand tight. Don't crank that thing in there. Next time you change brakes, you're gonna kick yourself in the butt. Okay, now go ahead and we'll get a bracket on there and get a bolt through that. All right, now we just get our caliper put on there. Try to sneak that on. The big electric motor's kind of in the way, so. You get your persuasion stick here. Just like so. There. Grab me a couple bolts. Make sure all your hoses and everything's routed properly, nothing's twisted up. We're looking good. That's in place, that's in place. We're tightened down there. And just give it a little spin. Sounds good. We have nothing that's contacting. It spins, everybody's happy. Those two things are staked down. Last thing I do is clean the back of the rim, the mating surface that sits against here. And then we just put our wheel nuts on, torque everything down, and take it for a drive, make sure it's okay. All right, we're just gonna zip these on with our gun. Okay, and then we just torque those down to 103 foot-pounds. That's pretty much it. If you have any questions, throw them down in the comment section below. Be glad to answer all your questions, or try to anyways. And then give the video a thumbs up if you like the content. Subscribe for more content. We'll catch you in the next one.